Hello, I am back. I'm going to do one more video, well, probably two more actually, but this one's going to be on another tip, tools, techniques video on using your paints. When I began learning how to paint and I was watching other painters, no one ever did a video on all about paper, all about the paints, or all about the brushes, or basic painting techniques. Never. I couldn't find it anywhere. Instead, they would paint an object, a subject, and they would teach you one little technique here or there as you moved along, which I will do as well when we're doing subjects. But I really wish I had had the kind of videos that I'm making for you right now, which is why I'm making them. So today it's all about using your paints. We had another video about all about paints. Now this one's all about using your paints, different things you should know about using your watercolor. So the first thing is making swatches. Making swatches is a really good idea, okay? These are swatches where you actually put the name of your paint, or if you have your tubes numbered, you could put a number on here instead of a name of a color. I often put the names of the actual paint colors on here and make a swatch. And I'm going to show you how to make a swatch, but I'll show you how they can be so helpful. Let me just switch over here for a second. So let's take a look at swatches and what they can do for you. Here is a set of swatches. These are actually named cobalt, teal blue, manganese blue hue, etc. So I labeled them, and I find making swatches actually very relaxing. I like to put them a thick coat of paint on the brush, start at the top, and work my way down with thick to thinner, 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 thinner. And if it's not thin enough, I'll rinse the brush off with water, just pure water, and grab just a little bit of that paint and continue on down. And that way I can see what that color looks like on the watercolor paper when it's very liquidy and wet, like a tea consistency. I can also see what it looks like if I put it on really heavy, like a cream consistency. So all of them you'll see get from dark to light. Sometimes I kind of did a big fat switch, but that's the idea. And actually doing this with your brush like this and doing that is also a good experience and good practice on how to use your brushes. So I really suggest that you take whatever paint you have and make swatches. It's comforting. You will use them forever. It's kind of relaxing. Now, here's another reason I do swatches. This is a swatch. Let me see if I can get you a little closer on this one. This is a swatch having to do with flesh tones in paintings. I'm going to back it up just a little bit. I was doing a lot of work on people, and this was flesh tones that are warmer, and on this side are warmer colors, over here cooler colors. Did another set of swatches over here for darker skinned people. What colors would you use? And I actually labeled them all. So for instance, this is more olive. If they have an olive skin, this is more fair skin. This is teal, this is Payne's gray mixed together with this color. So I labeled the colors, and I just kind of kept moving color to color to color. So when I do a people portrait, I can go to these two swatch cards and say, oh, I remember now to do that kind of skin, I took these two colors and put them together, and this is what I'm going to get. And if I do it even lighter, more transparent, I'm going to get an even lighter tone. But I use these still when I'm doing people portraits to remind myself what colors did I use. Because I don't know about you, but I forget. I forget what color I used after time goes by. I did the same thing with my metallic colors, for using those. I mean, see, I have a ton of these. I have lots and lots and lots of these, and I put them in color groups of blues, greens, reds. So when I want to do a painting and I want to use a red, I can say, well, what red do I want to use? These are all very different. But I'll say, I think I really like this one, and I think I'm going to pair that up with a yellow like this one. It's called red oxide, and this areolan look really great together. And I can just go, I can see how I can mix and match my colors and what I want to use for each painting. Payne's gray versus lamp black. ivory black, neutral tint. Do I want a black? Do I want a black with gray undertones? Do I want a black with blue undertones? What kind of black do I want? So making swatches, and you always do the same thing, darker at the top, thicker like a cream consistency, and then kind of pull it down to a lighter consistency, more like weak tea. So you can see all the variations of the color from a dark all the way to light. This one happens to be, I think, a good example of that. There's my blues. See, and I really pulled those guys down. I really watered them out. So I could see, well, how will it look if I use it in a very watery way versus in a real thick, creamy consistency. Now take a look at this particular color. This is granulating paint. I could see it right away. You can also tell when you do these which paints are granulating and which are non-granulating, because you can see little tiny like granule looks in that. So it solves a lot of problems for you when you make swatches. I'm not going to bother you with all of these swatches, but let's talk about granulating and non-granulating. I just showed you an example of a granulating one on the blue. For sure that's granulating. The one right next to it is non-granulating, smooth, the color smooth as can be. So that's how to tell which one they are, and you'll use them in your painting in different ways. I usually use non-granulating colors for something I want to have look smooth, and granulating colors for something that I want to have look like rock or a dirt path, something that I want some grit in it, I want some texture in it, and then I'll pick that color instead. So I have all these different swatch charts I've made, and I use them all the time for deciding what colors to use and which paints to use in my paintings. So let's look at this. I'm just going to make one swatch for you to give you an idea of how to do it. Lots of water on your brush. Grab some heavy-duty color. You want it thick. So I'm going to put a lot of color on this brush, not so much water as color. I'm going to do it over here. Start at the top, push your brush down, and just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, looks like it's the same color, right? Clean your brush off, more water, and let's just push this up. Or if you have to, mush it over. Just take a little tiny bit of your paint and pull it out with a lot of water next to it. Now suddenly you can see what that would look like if it was done with lots of water and very little color versus really deep color. This is a very vibrant color. You can do that with all of them. Just pull a little bit out at the end so you can see what does it look like if I add a ton of water. Yeah, I can see there's some brown colors in there actually. There's a little bit of brown highlighting in there. This will give you a great idea of all the different grade variations of value that you could use for that particular paint. So granulating, non-granulating. Let's talk about staining and non-staining. So some paints are made to grip the paper. Get this over here further. Grip the paper more than other. Hang on one second. I can see this piece of paper is too big. I'm just going to cut it in half real quickly so you can see much better what I'm doing. Okay, here we are. So staining and non-staining means, can you erase them, basically? They're made with certain elements and minerals where they actually just grip onto that paper and don't want to let it go. So what I did before I started this video was I just made a couple of swatches here with a green and a blue. It's just simply sap green and a regular ultramarine blue. Both are the same. These are the same. I just switched the colors. And I want to show you something about staining and non-staining. So non-staining colors will come out very easily when you try to erase them. If you remember the cone flowers that we did, I did some erasing on the cone flowers. I'm going to try the same thing with these colors. So I'm going to take a wet brush and I'm going to lay it on the corner of this and see if once it activates the paint's dry, I'm going to activate it with water and dampen it up again and see if I can wipe it away with my brush. This is one way to take away something that you don't want. It's coming away I will use a Kleenex because you know I love Kleenex. If I keep working on that, keep washing my brush and doing it more and more and more and keep wetting it, it's starting now to release all of the colors that are, do it this way, that are in the nooks and crannies of the paper. So it takes a while to get down to those nooks and crannies. It's getting lighter and lighter, but I don't think it's ever going to come completely off. So I would call that color a staining color. A non-staining color would be like what we did on the cone flowers, where you could actually wipe away the paint. Is it easier to wipe away a mistake when the paint is fresh? Absolutely. This is not fresh, but it was done about a half hour ago. It's not like it's been here for 6 years. So this is one way to erase paint. Not erasing very well. Let's look at the second way. A scrubber brush. If you just saw the video I did on all about brushes, you saw scrubber brushes. Very rough. Be careful how much you scrub because you could actually scrub a hole in your paper or rough your paper up so it has little particles of paper that'll never go away. That you don't want. I'm going to put my scrubber brush in the water and I'm going to see if I can get it off with the scrubber brush. Then I'm going to show you the really cool way to get paint off. It really isn't. It's not budging. I don't even see any paint on the scrubber brush. It's not really lifting. So this color of paint that I have on here, I would consider a staining color. So you might want to be careful about always using that particular one. But let me show you the last thing I want to show you. Let me see if I can get this in a good... This is the miracle worker right here. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. They come in a box on Amazon. You get a whole ton of them. They'll last you forever. Or share them with somebody else. Just be sure that you get Mr. Clean Magic Eraser Original. They've come out with some other ones now lately that say they have soap in them. Do not get the ones with soap in them. You don't want that. You just want the regular old original Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. And I take them and I cut them up because I like to have a small one to work with. So I cut it up, get my scissors. I always have scissors with my brushes. Always have scissors nearby. I'm just going to cut a piece of that off. I like to do it in a wedge. See how I did that in a wedge? Because the wedge, this is the edge I'm going to use to try to get the paint off. Now I'm going to put this in the water, in the clear water, and let it soak for a sec, and squeeze it out like you would a sponge. Now let's see what Mr. Clean can do with this same problem. Laying it on there, making sure that the paint's getting wet. Now I'm going to wipe it. Well, it works much better than the other things did, and it's working on the blue too. If I just do a swatch right across the top, it won't tear your paper up the way a scrubber brush will. It will tear the paper up if you do it too heavy, too many times, repeatedly. But this is starting to look, pretty good, and I'm actually able to take off paint better with Mr. Clean Magic Erasers than I was the scrubber brush, and scrubber brushes are made for that very purpose. So let's not be buying scrubber brushes, let's just buy some Mr. Clean Magic Erasers, original. It shouldn't say now with special cleaning agents or now with soap or whatever. But you see, now that I take my Kleenex and spot that is pretty darn good. Originally it looked like it wasn't coming off at all, and now we have eliminated this whole band of paint across here. So Mr. Clean wins the day. So staining and non-staining means paints that are easier to get off than other paints. Granulating and non-granulating, it's either got very smooth texture or it has little microscopic granules in it. Most of the granulating ones are earth tone paints like raw sienna, burnt sienna, yellow ochre. Things that are made with a lot of earth minerals are usually more of the granulating kind. So the other is color fast and non-color fast. This would not be considered color fast or non-color fast. But by that I mean something that you paint in a painting. Like let me here and get... by that I mean something that you paint that doesn't fade versus a painting and 6 months after hanging in your house especially in Arizona, is suddenly fading. So some paints are fading and some are color fast. I mentioned this in All About Paint, so go back and look at that video. About some paints will actually be more color fast and will hold their true color. Others will fade very quickly. There is a site you can go to, just Google that, fading versus non-fading paints, and there's a lady who does a video and tells all about those. So, now, transparency, layers of paint, and glazes. Let's go back to our other camera and look at our paper again. So, let's get that straightened up a little bit. So on this issue, it's a matter of painting with transparency. Watercolor is made to paint as a transparent medium. That's what we love about it, is that you can layer things on top of each other. So for instance, I did some green here and some blue here, and I purposefully painted the blue across the green so they would blend together. This lovely transparency of the two paints coming together is what watercolor is all about. Now, once you do that, you can layer upon layer of paint and change the look of it completely. Suppose I want to make this look a little bit different. I could put a glaze on it. You can put layers of paint and you can put glazes. So a glaze is very, very watery. I'm going to take some yellow paint here, but I'm going to use practically no paint at all. I am going to simply make a ton of water and a little tiny bit of paint. That's what you call tea consistency. It's actually less than tea consistency. It's super, super watery. And I'm going to put, a, quote, a glaze on top of this and see what happens. Now, when I paint animals, I use a lot of glazing. Put more water on top. I do a lot more glazing when I'm doing animals because it takes a lot of colors or layers of glaze to pull coats, fur coats together with all the multicolors that are in it. Now when I just did that, it was interesting because it turned this green much more yellow. It turned the blue more yellow, and it gave a whole different look to the entire part, the entire piece. The secret of doing this is understanding the thickness of your color. So we're going to do 3 things, maybe 4. We're going to talk about the consistency of paint. Cream, milk, and tea. If I take my brush, I think I'll use a different brush for this. If I take a brush and I put some very heavy paint on it, not so much water, but really a lot of paint, it's like the swatch we made earlier. This would be called cream consistency. Very thick, thick, thick paint. That would be cream consistency. If I decided to do it as milk consistency, think about literally milk that you would drink out of a jug. You know, think about what that looks like. This would be milk consistency. Hang on, didn't get enough paint on that. Still didn't get enough paint on that. There, this would be about milk consistency. So it's much waterier. This was really thick. Look at the difference in how the color, this is the same paint, but look at the difference in the color. Cream consistency, milk consistency, and now we're going to do tea consistency, which is a super watery. Lots of water on the brush, practically no paint. Now there you go. Can you even see it? This is tea consistency, lots of water, practically no color. This is milk consistency. The stuff coming off your brush is about the consistency of milk, and it's more color than this one. This was cream consistency. Lots and lots of paint, very little water. And then I do a 4th one. I actually will take my tube and take paint out of the tube on the top. I mean, literally lift it right out of the tube. Let me give you an example of that. Not very often do I do this, but I get my brush wet, I squeeze it just a tiny bit out of the tip of the tube, and pick it up. Now that is a gunky piece of paint. That will be super, super thick. That's a different shade, sorry, different colors than that was, but this will be really thick. And I've done that from time to time. It just depends on what I'm painting and what effect I'm going for. So remember these three basic levels of value. Value is how dark or how light a color is. This value is very dark, cream consistency. This value is much lighter, milk consistency. This value is super, super light, like weak tea. Think about tea and how you can see right through it, and it's just a weak color. Weak tea consistency, milk consistency, water consistency. And I'll be talking about that in the next few painting videos we do, and saying to you, make some milk consistency. Look at the huge difference in color. This is the same paint. Amazing, isn't it? But you can get a very different look with each one. And layering paint, glazing paint. If I took that right now, let's do that. Let's take that and put a whole different kind of color on top. I think I'm going to take an orange out of my... Now what would you do with a glaze? If you think about a glaze, you want it watery, don't you? You don't want to have thick. A glaze would imply that you're simply going to impact the colors underneath it in a small way. Here's an orange glaze. Whoops, didn't get enough paint on my brush. Enough anything on my brush. Now be careful with glazes. I'm doing an orange glaze. Be careful with glazes. Here's the rule about glazes. It's always very weak, tea consistency, and you always put it on very quickly and get out. Don't linger. If you linger on a glaze, you'll begin to lift up the paint underneath. It will begin to weaken and soften from the water you're putting on top of it, and you'll end up pulling all the beautiful transparency colors together into mud, and you don't want that. But this made a really nice change. This did do a nice thing. See, I could put more and more layers and keep changing the look. And what it ends up doing is it ends up becoming deeper and richer in color because you're layering glaze by glaze by glaze, different colors on top of it. Now, you wouldn't want to just glaze indiscriminately, like I think I'll try yellow, and then I'll try green, and then I'll try blue. You want to have the glaze be some kind of an element that you're trying to pull out of the color underneath it, and we'll discuss that in the future. So, two last things. One is the three ways of putting paint onto paper. You've done already two of them actually. The first one was wet on dry. You did that with the first coneflower painting. Wet on dry. That simply means wet paint on dry paper. There it is. Paper's dry. I'm putting wet paint on it. That's one way of doing it. The second way, do you remember what it was called? Wet on wet. That's where we actually wet our paper first. I'm going to do something kind of odd here. I'm just going to kind of do lots of wet. Let the water seep into the paint a little, into the paper. Make sure the paper is good and wet into the ridge, into the little English muffin dents, and then put some paint on it and see what it does. I want you to see this really well. I think I'll try blue. Fairly good amount of color here. I'd say it's cream consistency. It's going into a wet paper, and let's see what happens. It makes blooms, what's called blooms in watercolor. Watch it go poof. It moves through the water. You can move the card and actually make the paint run, which is really cool because then it'll do even cooler stuff. You can introduce another color and have it all bloom at the same time. I call it poofing, but really the term is supposed to be blooming. Paint blooms when you put wet paint on wet paper. Sometimes you want bloom, sometimes you don't want bloom. So this is what it'll do if you put wet on wet. The third one is dry on dry. Now you think, well, how can you have dry paint? That doesn't make any sense. Well, I'll show you how you do that. You take a brush that's barely, in fact, let me think I'll use a different brush, barely wet, okay, just damp, and you put some paint on it. Let's use some like a rust, a little bit more water on my brush. But really dampen down your brush on some tissue paper and get it so it's just damp. And then we're gonna pick up some paint from here. So it's really quite dry. There's not even water floating around it here. Damp brush, barely damp paint, and we're just gonna do this across the page. Let's see if we can make this closer. Okay, watch. Dry paint, practically no water in that paint, and a dry paper will cause skittering across the page. Now you think, well, that's kind of ugly. I don't want to have my paint skitter like that. You probably don't typically, but what if you're painting rocks or a wall or bricks, something where you want a dirt path going down a road, something where you want that kind of texture? Then you're going to want to put dry on dry. Next, last thing we're going to talk about is hard and soft edges. So if I'm painting and I have what's called a hard edge, I'll use a dark color again, blue, so you can see this easily. And I'm painting and I get a hard edge on something. Right? And I didn't want that hard edge there. This is a hard edge. You see that line right there? The paper and the paint meet together in a hard line. If you wet your brush, make it clean, make it damp, and just touch the edge. Clean the brush, wipe it off a little, and touch the edge. Or you could even just move the paintbrush into that edge and let it come out. You will end up with a soft edge where the paint just oozes out into a very, very light color. So you can change hard edges into soft edges by taking a clean, damp brush and just touching, just dotting along the edge of the hard line, and it will release and become a soft edge. So that's about it. I've watched this video 2 or 3 times, to be honest with you, because there's a lot in here. We will cover all of this. We will cover all of this as we paint other things. I'll say, here's a hard edge, let's make it a soft edge. And I'll say, let's put a glaze on that. And I'll kind of reiterate those things as we go along and do different paintings. But here's a great, I think, a great tutorial to learn a lot about how to use your paints, how to make your paint bloom, how to make hard edges, how to make them soft edges, how to paint wet on dry, wet on wet, and dry on dry. How to use different values and make different values on your painting using either cream consistency, milk consistency, or tea consistency paint. Because values are very important. They're almost, I say they're more important than the color you use. You could paint a tree that's green, you could paint a tree that's pink. And if you had the right values, meaning the right depth of color, darks and lights, it would look like a great tree even if it was pink. So it's not about the colors always so much as the values of the colors. And you get those values, those lights and darks, by how much water you add to the paint. So that's a huge, huge thing to learn about watercolor. And we'll learn more about that as we go along, as we paint other objects and subjects, and we use those techniques in our paintings. But think about those. You might even take some notes about that. I'll put a whole bunch of this information down in the comment section. And until next time, I'm really glad you joined me. We have one more tips, tools, and techniques video I'm going to make called sources. Finding sources. Like, where do you find the pictures that you paint? Where can I find things that aren't like copyrighted that I'm going to get in trouble for? Where do I find them? And I know where to find them. So, till next time, be good to yourself. Go create something and have a great day.